I never believed in all that supernatural stuff. Ghost stories, haunted places, those were just for movies, right? But after what happened during my late shift last night, I'm not so sure anymore. I work the graveyard shift at a 24-hour convenience store. It's mostly quiet, a few regulars coming in, but it's not exactly what you'd call thrilling. Just me, the hum of the coolers, and the occasional clink of the bell above the door. Last night started out like any other. Around 1 a.m., the streets were deserted, and the only sound came from the overhead lights flickering now and then. The fluorescent bulbs above the counter have been dying for weeks, casting a sickly yellow glow over everything. Around 2:30, I was restocking the cigarette shelf behind the register when the doorbell chimed. I didn't look up right away. I figured it was one of the usual late-night drunks, stumbling in for beer or a pack of smokes. But when I did glance toward the door, something about the guy standing there made my skin crawl. He was tall. Too tall, actually, like he didn't quite fit through the doorway. His clothes were old-fashioned, like something out of a black-and-white photograph, and they were soaked. I mean, dripping. His coat, his hair, even his boots, they left a trail of water on the floor. It hadn't rained all night, so I had no idea where he'd come from. I forced a smile. "Hey, can I help you?" The guy just stood there, staring at me. His face was pale, almost gray, and his eyes, they didn't look right. They were too dark, too deep, like staring into a bottomless well. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. He hadn't moved, hadn't blinked. I was about to ask again when, finally, he took a slow, jerky step toward the counter. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The man's lips twitched into what I think was supposed to be a smile, but it was all wrong. His mouth stretched too wide, showing yellowed teeth that were too sharp. He leaned in closer, water dripping onto the counter, and whispered in a voice that sounded like gravel scraping across concrete. "Do you sell time?" I blinked. "What?" "Time." He said it again, slower this time, like I hadn't understood. "I need more time." I didn't know what to say. Maybe he was on drugs or he was messing with me, but something about the way he asked made my stomach twist. I glanced at the clock on the wall. 2:43 a.m. We don't sell that." "Sorry, man," I stammered. His smile dropped instantly, and his face twisted into something else, something angry. He slammed his hand on the counter, and I jumped. Water splashed everywhere, and I noticed for the first time that his hand wasn't just wet. It was swollen, like something that had been bloated and left to rot in a river. "I need more time," he growled, his voice so low it was almost a rumble. "Give it to me." I backed up, my heart racing. This wasn't normal. "Look, man, I think you need to leave," I said, trying to sound firm but failing miserably. "We don't have what you're looking for." The man's eyes darkened, and for a moment, I thought I saw something moving in them, something slithering just beneath the surface. He leaned in even closer, his breath cold and damp against my skin. "I'm running out of time." My body locked up. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. His hand was reaching for me, those bloated, waterlogged fingers stretching out. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, it was over. The bell above the door rang again, and the guy was gone. The air was still cold, and there was water on the floor where he'd been standing, but he was just gone. I stood there, heart pounding, staring at the spot where he'd been. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely pick up the phone to call my manager, but when I finally got through, all I could say was, "I need help. Now." The cops showed up about 15 minutes later. They checked the security cameras, but there was nothing. The footage showed me standing there, talking to no one, backing up, looking scared out of my mind, but there was no one else in the store. They didn't believe me. They think I imagined it, that I was tired or hallucinating, but I know what I saw. And the worst part? After the cops left, I went back to the counter to finish restocking, and that's when I noticed the puddle of water was still there.